So do you support that rebate for everybody?
We'll support the bill that the government's putting through because, as we saw with the tax cuts, they won't change their position. But I don't understand why you and I on high incomes would be getting $300. I think there are a lot of families at the moment who really are genuinely struggling to understand how they're going to pay all of their bills this month.
So you would
know that when they go
you would
to the
means test
supermarket.
it. Would you cap it? Would you means test it?
I think there's a more sensible way of doing it. But again, it's an election commitment, right? So you're seeing it with Stephen Miles in Brisbane, in Queensland as well, splashing out $1,000. That's not about an economic measure. It's actually inflationary. They are going to do that because they've got an election coming up. And that's exactly what this government's doing as well. They're trying to buy themselves an interest rate cut before the election and pretend that everything's okay, whereas it's not. As all of the credible economists have said overnight, this is inflationary. It's going to drive up inflation and therefore interest rates. And it's going to prolong the pain for a lot of families for many years to come. The government was bequeathed a good set of books when they came into power. They've had 2 surpluses and now they've blown it. So every year, prospectively now, under a Labor government, they go into more and more and more debt. And that is going to be a bill that ultimately is paid for by Australian families, small businesses and taxpayers more generally.
So, I mean, if you win the next election, Pete, you're going to have to make cuts. You're going to have to make big cuts because there's a sea of red ink after this year. So what are you eyeing off?
Well, Pete, we're not going to give billions of dollars to billionaires during a housing emergency. The government's brought in 1.67 million people over the course of a 5-year period, or they will do, almost 1 million people over the course of just the last 2 years. House starts in our country are at an 11-year low. People know they can't get a builder or a tradie to come and renovate, or an electrician. It's tough out there. And the fact is that you can't find rental accommodation. People can't find a house for their children or grandchildren. It's a big problem, and the government has made decisions deliberately over the last 2 years, over the last 2 budgets, which have hurt families, not helped them. And this budget only contributes to that. So I think there are a lot of issues that we need to address as a nation. We need to keep our country secure and we need to keep people safe, but we also need to make sure that we can address Labor's homegrown inflation problem. It's fuelled by giving billionaires additional billions of dollars, so that would be the first savings. But there'll be others that we can identify, because ultimately what I want to do is get inflation down and interest rates down. That would be the greatest assistance that you could provide to families. But unfortunately, in this budget, through high spending and high taxing, the government has put upward pressure on inflation and therefore upward pressure on interest rates.
I'm just curious here. Where would you make the cap rather on the energy savings?
Oh well, Pete. I mean, for example, Clive Palmer, he gets $1,000 from Stephen Miles, and he gets $300 from Anthony Albanese.
But if there's an income threshold, what would you be eyeing off?
Well, let's look at it in time. But at the moment, you've got this money will go out the door before the next budget. So it's sort of a moot discussion. I think at the moment, what we need to recognise is that all of these billions of dollars are going out, but nothing is made in Australia except inflation, homegrown inflation under Labor. And that's going to really hit families more disproportionately and more negatively than it will the billionaires who are going to be the big winners out of this budget.